the empty stomach and the silent cry. The wind was cold that night. Jacob, a human supply worker, had just finished sorting metal parts inside his small outpost on the edge of the alien wastelands. He lived alone on this quiet planet, far from cities, far from noise, far from war. But tonight something felt different. He heard a soft sound. Not the wind. Not metal clanking. Something else. A cry. It was weak. Small, like a baby's voice, so faint it could have been a dream. Jacob grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The moon above was large and red, shining dimly on the rocky ground. He followed the sound. One step at a time. Quiet. Careful. Then, he saw her. A woman. Alien, thin as a shadow, her skin pale blue and full of dust. She sat against a boulder, legs shaking, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. The baby was not crying anymore. It was too weak to cry now. Jacob stayed back. He didn't want to scare her. Her eyes met his, wide and full of fear. She hugged the baby tighter. He slowly knelt and placed his flashlight on the ground. Then, from his jacket, he took out a soft bread roll. It wasn't fresh, but it was warm. He placed it gently on a flat stone between them and stepped back. The woman stared at it, then at him. Her lips trembled. Then she reached out, slowly like a scared animal, and picked up the bread. She broke off a small piece, soaked it with her own spit to soften it, and placed it inside the baby's mouth. The baby sucked on it, tiny eyes blinking slowly, and then something broke inside her. Tears fell from her eyes. She tried to speak, but only a soft whimper came out. She pressed her forehead to the child's and rocked gently. Jacob didn't speak. He just watched. She tried to eat the rest of the bread, but stopped. She broke it in half and offered the other piece back to him. Jacob shook his head. "You need it more." She stared at him, confused. She didn't understand his words, but she felt something in his tone. Kindness. She pressed the bread to her chest like it was gold, or a miracle. Jacob pointed to her baby. "Boy or girl?" The woman didn't reply. She looked down at the child, kissed its head, and whispered something in her own tongue. Jacob noticed her clothes were torn, her feet bare, her body shaking. He took off his long jacket and walked forward slowly. She flinched. He stopped. Raised, his hands to show he meant no harm, then gently draped the jacket over her shoulders. The woman froze, then slowly pulled it around her body. It was warm, thicker than anything she had. She gave a tiny nod. Jacob sat on the ground across from her. "Why are you out here?" he asked quietly, knowing she wouldn't understand. She looked up at the stars, then down at her baby, then at the dirt. She picked up a small stick and began drawing in the soil. A rough picture appeared. First, a round shape, maybe a village. Then flames. Then 3 stick figures, her baby, and one crossed out. Maybe her husband, then an arrow leading away. Alone. Jacob understood. She was cast out. Or she ran. Alone with her baby. No food. No shelter. He felt something heavy in his chest. "No one should suffer like this," he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes shiny with tears. Her lips moved. One word came out, broken and unsure. "Huh. Man?" Jacob nodded. "Yes. Human." She held the baby close and whispered the word again. Human. It was not a question anymore. It was a quiet hope. Jacob stood up and looked at the dark hills behind her. "Where do you sleep?" She pointed behind the boulder. A narrow path led to a small hidden cave. He walked over to check. It was dry but cold and empty, just a pile of old leaves and a cracked water bottle. He turned back. "You can't stay here," he said. "It's too cold." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the meaning. She lowered her head. Jacob looked at the baby. Its tiny fingers moved slowly. Its lips were dry. He stepped forward and said, "Come, I'll help." She didn't move at first, then slowly she stood. Her legs wobbled. She clutched the baby tightly and followed him. They walked in silence, step by step through the wind and dust. Back to his outpost. Back to warmth. Behind them, the stars watched, and for the first time in many days, the alien widow's baby made a sound. A soft, sleepy sigh, not a cry of pain but of peace. The cold cave and her hidden past. The outpost heater hummed softly. Inside, the small metal shelter smelled of warm soup and engine oil. The alien widow sat near the corner, her baby wrapped in a thick blanket Jacob had given. Her eyes followed his every move, not with fear now, but with quiet caution. She still didn't speak much. Her words were few and soft, but her silence spoke louder than anything. Jacob placed a warm bowl near her. "Eat," he said gently. She looked at the food, then looked at him. Slowly, she dipped her fingers into the soup and brought it to her mouth. A soft sigh escaped her lips. She hadn't tasted warmth in a long time. The baby cooed weakly and clutched her chest. Jacob sat down across the room, pretending to fix some tools, but his eyes stayed on them. He had many questions. Where was her home? What happened to her husband? Why was she all alone? But she didn't speak his language, so he watched and waited. That night, after the widow and her baby fell asleep on the mat, Jacob stepped outside. He stared at the stars and thought, what kind of people abandon a mother and child like that? He had seen war, seen hunger. But this was different. This wasn't just survival, it was exile. The next morning, the woman was gone. Jacob panicked. His bed mat was empty, the blanket folded, baby clothes missing. He rushed outside. Tracks. Small footprints in the sand. Heading toward the hills. He followed. The trail led him back to the same rocky area where he had first found her. But this time, she was standing, arms crossed, staring at a flat stone wall. Jacob slowed down, confused. Then she pointed. There were marks carved into the stone, rough symbols. Not human. Her language. She picked up a stick and drew again on the ground. This time the drawing was different. There was a tall figure, a man, with sharp horns on his head. He stood with a weapon. Below him, many smaller figures bowed, and, in the corner, a woman holding a baby trying to run away. Jacob pointed to the horned figure. "Who?" She looked at him, voice quiet. "Warlord," she whispered. He understood. She had escaped someone dangerous. Someone powerful. She pointed at herself and then crossed her wrists as if tied. Then at the baby and made a cradling motion. Jacob's heart dropped. "They tried to take your baby?" She didn't answer. But she didn't have to. He looked around. The land was silent, but the air felt heavy, like someone might be watching. Back inside the cave, she showed him a small rock hidden behind loose dirt. Inside was a cloth bundle, old family things, a cracked pendant, a faded picture, some dried flowers. She pressed the pendant to her lips and closed her eyes. Jacob sat down near her, and for the first time, tried drawing something himself. He drew a square with a door, then a plate of food, then stick figures. Her, the baby. And him. He pointed to the drawing and then to himself. Home. The alien widow stared at it, then looked at him, her eyes filled with something new, not fear, not sadness, trust. She nodded, but before they could return, they heard it. A sound from the hills, a low hum, mechanical, moving. Jacob pulled her behind a rock and peeked out. Scout drone, not his. Alien. Armed. It scanned the area, then flew over them heading toward the cave. Jacob's voice was firm. We need to move. Now. She didn't understand the words, but saw the look in his eyes. She wrapped the baby tight and followed him as he led them through a hidden path down the canyon. By the time they returned to the outpost, night had fallen again. Jacob locked the doors and covered the windows. The alien woman held her baby tight and finally whispered a name. Reza. Jacob turned. That's you? She shook her head. She pointed at the child. Reza. Then placed a hand on her chest. Tali. Jacob repeated the names. Reza. Tali. The widow smiled faintly. She had told him their names. She had given him her trust. And now, Jacob knew it wasn't just hunger that had nearly taken their lives. It was something worse. Something still coming. A village that turned its back 3 days had passed. Jacob watched Tali feed Reza with gentle hands. The baby looked stronger now. His eyes were brighter. He had even laughed once. It was a small sound, but it echoed loudly in Jacob's heart. But Tali didn't laugh. She smiled sometimes, nodded at Jacob, whispered soft alien words, but her eyes always returned to the window, scanning the hills, watching, waiting. For what? Jacob needed answers. That morning, as Tali and Reza slept peacefully, in the outpost, Jacob filled his water pack and grabbed his old scanner. He traced the direction where Tali had drawn her village symbol in the dirt a few days ago. He decided to go there, alone. The path was long and quiet. He crossed dry cliffs and sharp rocks, climbed narrow ledges and passed strange plants that glowed faintly under the sun. Finally, just before noon, he saw it, the village. It was small, round stone huts, smoke rising from the center. Alien banners waved gently in the breeze. Children played. Adults worked with tools. It looked normal, peaceful, but Jacob knew better. He entered slowly. Heads turned. A few villagers stepped back. Some whispered. Others stared at his strange human clothes. Then, an older alien man stepped forward. Tall. Gray markings on his face. He spoke in a deep voice Jacob didn't understand. But he didn't look friendly. Jacob raised his hands and spoke calmly. I'm here in peace. He pulled out a small picture Tali had drawn, a symbol of her and the baby. He showed it. Gasps filled the air. One woman spat on the ground. Another made a strange sign with her fingers and turned away. Some murmured a word again and again. Exenta, Exenta. A young girl nearby whispered it quietly to herself. Jacob gently knelt beside her. What does that mean? The girl stared, then tapped her throat and made a cutting motion. Outcast, dangerous, cursed. Jacob stood up, his face cold. These people had pushed a mother and child out to die. Why? He moved toward the older man again and showed a drawing. Tali, a baby, a tall warrior with horns. He pointed. Warlord? The man growled, then did something strange. He reached under his robe and pulled out a broken pendant, same as the one Jacob had seen in Tali's bundle. He threw it to the ground and crushed it with his heel. He said one word with venom. Traitor. Jacob understood now. Tali hadn't just escaped a warlord. She had been married to one and she had left him. Jacob returned before dark. His legs ached, but his mind was racing. He entered the outpost and Tali rushed toward him, eyes wide with fear. You go. Village? He nodded. She stepped back, holding Reza tighter. They hate me. Jacob didn't ask how she knew. She just did. He sat beside her and spoke slowly. Why did you leave him? The warlord? Tali looked down. Her lips trembled. She reached for the stick and drew again in the dirt near the heater. This time her drawing had more detail. A woman, on her knees, a tall figure above her, fist raised, a baby behind her. Then, a line, a break, a path, escape. Jacob's jaw tightened. She had been beaten, abused. She had fled in the night, taking only her baby. And her village? They had called her a traitor for choosing freedom. Later that night, as they sat by the small heater, Tali placed Reza in Jacob's arms. Just for a minute. The baby didn't cry. He looked up at Jacob with sleepy eyes, then closed them peacefully. Jacob looked at Tali. "You did the right thing," he said. She didn't understand his words, but maybe she understood the tone. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, not with fear, but with gratitude. Then, in a quiet voice, she whispered, "They come soon." Jacob frowned. "Who?" She didn't reply, but outside, far in the distance, a soft red light blinked in the sky, watching, waiting, fire in the night, attack from shadows. The night was too quiet. Jacob felt it in his bones. He checked the motion sensors twice. He double-locked the metal door. Outside, wind stirred the sand, whispering across the rocks like distant voices. Tali sat near the heater, rocking Reza gently. Her eyes didn't blink. She stared at the door like she was waiting for it to burst open. Jacob whispered, "Tali, what did you mean? They come soon?" She didn't answer, but she pointed at the sky. Jacob followed her finger and saw it. Red glows, like tiny stars, blinking slowly and moving. Not falling. Not satellites. Scouts. They had found her. Suddenly the lights outside the outpost flickered. Then, complete darkness. The heater shut off. The outpost died. Jacob jumped up. "Power's out," he muttered. He reached for his emergency light and turned it on. A dim blue glow filled the room. Tali stood up too, holding Reza close. Her breathing was fast. She whispered in her language, words Jacob didn't know. But he understood the fear. They were here. Then came the knock, not a knock like a friend, a loud, slow pound. Boom. 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 Jacob grabbed his pulse pistol and stood in front of Tali. The door was strong, but not strong enough. Another hit. Boom. This one left a dent. Jacob shouted, "Get to the back room, now." Tali hesitated, then ran with the baby. Jacob pointed the pistol at the door. He could hear voices outside now. Low, clicking sounds. Alien tongues. Then, silence. Jacob's finger tightened on the trigger. Suddenly, the window shattered. A black metal hook flew in, smashing the glass. Jacob fired once, blue light hitting the wall. He saw them, figures in shadow, tall, armored. One had glowing red eyes. Another wore a half-broken mask. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They wanted her. Jacob grabbed a smoke flare from the emergency case and threw it toward the window. It exploded, filling the room with thick white fog. Using the confusion, he slipped into the back room where Tali was hiding. She held Reza close, her back against the wall, whispering soft, calming words. Jacob knelt. "We can't stay. We have to run." Tali didn't understand, but she saw the fear on his face and nodded. Jacob pulled up a floor hatch. Beneath was a tunnel, used for storage. It led into the rocky fields behind the outpost. He helped her down, closed the hatch, and moved silently behind her. Above, the invaders kicked in the door. Too late. They were already gone. The night outside was cold, but not silent anymore. In the distance, alarms rang. Fires burned where the outpost once stood. The raiders had torched it, destroyed everything. Jacob watched the smoke rise behind them. Tali's lips trembled. "All gone?" He nodded. "Yes," her voice cracked. "You lose home. For us?" Jacob looked at her, then at the baby in her arms. "No," he said. "For what's right." They found a hiding spot in a narrow cliffside. Jacob lit a small heat stone. Tali sat beside him, rocking the baby back to sleep. She whispered, "He sent them." Jacob frowned. "Who?" She pointed toward the fire in the sky. Him, the warlord. My mate before. Her voice shook. I ran. Took child. He hunts me. Jacob clenched his fists. Then we stopped running. She looked at him with wide eyes. He nodded. We fight. Tali didn't speak for a while. Then, she said something soft. Human. Strong. Jacob gave a small smile. Human. Angry. And far in the smoke behind them, red eyes scanned the ground. But they were gone. Not broken. Just beginning. A trade that changed everything. The next morning, the world was quiet again. Ashes from the burned outpost floated in the air like black snow. Jacob stood at the edge of a cliff, watching smoke rise far behind them. The only home he had on this planet was gone. Beside him, Tali sat holding baby Reza close to her chest. The child was still, tired from the fear and cold. Jacob turned to her. We need supplies, he said softly. She looked up, confused. He pointed to the small satchel. Only a few crumbs of food and one half-filled water flask remained. She understood. They walked for hours through sharp rocks and hot wind, heading toward the distant lights of a trade post Jacob had only visited once. It wasn't friendly to aliens, or to humans, but it was the only place left. When they arrived at the metal gates, the guards looked at Tali with disgust. Not her kind. One of them growled in broken English. Jacob stepped forward. She's with me. The guard eyed him up and down. You sure? Half the people inside would pay to throw her out. Jacob didn't blink. She's not for sale. The guard laughed darkly. We'll see. Inside the trade station was a mix of dirt, oil, and noise. Stalls sold everything. Tools, food, weapons, clothes. But prices were high, and looks were colder. Tali kept her head low. Her grip on Reza tightened as eyes followed them. Jacob led them to an old trader, Milo, a wrinkled man with metal arms and tired eyes. Milo stared. Jacob? You look like you lost a war. Jacob gave a half smile. Maybe I did. He pointed to the supplies. I need food, medicine, blankets. Milo leaned in. For you, yes. For her? He tilted his head toward Tali. People talk. That's an exiled alien widow, the one the warlord's after. Jacob's voice was calm. She's a mother. That baby hasn't eaten real food in days. Milo crossed his arms. What do you offer? Jacob pulled out a small bag and dropped it on the table. Inside, his dog tags, a silver ring, and a small scanner. All he had left. Milo picked up the dog tags. These are military, real? Jacob nodded. Earth Division, second wave. Milo went quiet. He looked at Jacob, then at Tali. She worth this much? Jacob answered without pause. Yes. Milo said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned and filled a small pack. High-calorie bars, formula, pain patches, a heat lamp, and even a cloth blanket. He handed it over. Take it, and one more thing. He reached under the counter and gave Jacob a small disc. Warlord's men passed through here 2 nights ago, asking about a woman and child. They're close. Jacob's jaw clenched. Thanks. As they left, Milo called out softly, Be careful, human, mercy has a price. Outside, Tali held the blanket to her face. Her lips quivered. Jacob asked, What is it? She looked at him. You gave your name for us? He was confused. Name? She pointed to the dog tags in Milo's hand. Your name, your life, gone. Jacob shrugged. Names can be replaced. Lives can't. Tali stared at him for a long time, then reached into her robe and pulled out something small, her broken pendant. She placed it in his hand. Now, we are same. That night they rested in a hidden cave outside the trading post. The fire flickered low. Tali fed Reza real milk for the first time in days. The baby smiled in his sleep. Jacob sat nearby, watching. He asked gently, "Tali, why does he want the child?" Her face darkened. She looked at the flames. "He wants boy to grow, like him." She shook her head. "I say no." Jacob understood. The warlord didn't care about the child's life. He wanted power, a future weapon. And Tali had said no. She had run. She had chosen to protect life instead of serve death. Jacob looked at Reza and whispered, "He won't take him. Not while I'm breathing." Tali didn't speak, but she reached across the fire and touched his hand. And in the light of the flames, for the first time, she smiled. Not because she was safe, but because she wasn't alone anymore. The trial of trust. The wind howled louder that night. Jacob and Tali had moved deeper into the mountains, finding a small hollow inside the cliffs. It was cold, dark, and damp, but safe. For now. Inside, the baby slept wrapped in the soft blanket Milo had given them. Tali sat nearby, sharpening a broken metal pipe into a small blade. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were hard. Jacob watched in silence. He had seen soldiers break under less, but Tali, she was still standing, still protecting, still ready. "Why not keep running?" he asked, breaking the silence. Tali didn't look at him. She continued working the blade. "I run before," she said softly. "Each time, he finds." She looked up now, her voice steadier. "No more run. This time, we stop." Jacob nodded slowly. He respected that, but he also knew what stopping meant. Fighting. And maybe dying. The next morning, they climbed down into the lower valley, hoping to find water. Instead, they found trouble. 3 alien scouts. Not raiders, not traitors. Warlords' men. They were scanning the rocks, checking caves, searching. Tali grabbed Reza and ducked behind a tree. Jacob stepped forward, motioning her to stay hidden. He raised both hands and walked directly into the scouts' view. They raised their weapons. He didn't flinch. "I'm just a lost human," he said calmly, "looking for salvage." The leader walked closer. His helmet clicked and released steam. He spoke in broken English. "You alone?" Jacob nodded. "No one else here." The scout stared for a long moment. Then, without warning, he fired. Not at Jacob, at the tree behind him. The blast missed Reza by inches. Tali screamed. The scouts charged. Jacob reacted fast. He tackled the leader to the ground, grabbing the alien's weapon and firing at the second. Blue light burned across the rocks. The second scout fell. Tali pulled a rock and slammed it into the third attacker's head, screaming in rage. Jacob turned just in time to see her collapse on her knees, breathing hard. They had survived, but barely. Later that night, Jacob wrapped a bandage around her arm. She had been grazed by a blast. Tali stared into the fire, silent. Then suddenly she said, "You lied." Jacob blinked. "What?" She looked at him. "You say, alone. For me." He nodded. "To protect you." Her voice cracked. "You risked death. For my lie. For my baby." Jacob replied quietly, "He's not just your baby now." Tears welled in her eyes. "You trust me?" Jacob didn't answer with words. He placed his hand on Reza's chest right over the baby's small heartbeat. Then he nodded. "Yes, I trust you." The next morning they buried the scout bodies under rocks. Jacob salvaged armor parts and 2 working blasters. Tali didn't stop him. She helped. Together they prepared. They knew more were coming. That evening, while watching the stars, Tali asked a question. "If we fight, we die?" Jacob thought. "Maybe." She nodded slowly. "Still, I fight. She looked at the baby. I want Reza to know mother not weak. Jacob looked at her, the firelight in his eyes. He already knows. As the wind picked up again, they heard it. The distant sound of ships, engines roaring. The warlord's army had found them, but this time they weren't running, they were ready. A new family, a new fire. The first blast shook the mountain. Rocks fell. Dust filled the air. Reza cried out as Tali pressed him close to her chest. Jacob stood at the mouth of the cave, eyes locked on the smoke rising from the valley below. The warlord's ship had landed, black, massive like a crawling beast from a nightmare. Figures stepped out, armed, armored, trained to kill. Tali stood beside Jacob now, holding the makeshift blade in one hand and a blaster in the other. She wasn't just a widow anymore. She was a warrior. The first wave came fast, 3 soldiers climbing up the slope, weapons ready. Jacob fired first. 1 down. Tali shot next, her hand shaking but her aim true. The third got close, but Jacob tackled him down the cliffside. They rolled in the dust, punches flying, until Jacob stood over the body, breathing hard. Tali ran to him. You hurt? He shook his head. Not badly, but his side was bleeding. She tore part of her robe and pressed it against the wound. Her hands were rough now, no longer the hands of someone begging to survive. She had changed. So had he. They returned to the cave and blocked the entrance with heavy stones. Jacob looked at her. We can't hold forever. Tali nodded. We don't need forever, we need one chance. She pulled something from her bag, a small flare, a signal light. Jacob frowned. What's that? She looked at him seriously. Old tech, from before Warlord, sends one message to orbit. Jacob's eyes widened. A distress signal? She nodded. One time only. He looked at her. Who will answer? She didn't know, but they had no choice. Tali held Reza close and pressed the button. A blue light blinked. Far above, in orbit, the signal reached something. Someone. They didn't know who. They only hoped. Minutes passed. Then, thunder. Not from the mountain. From the sky. A human ship. Old Earth design. Heavy. Loud. It dropped into the valley with a roar, scattering the warlord's troops like ants. Tali gasped. Jacob grabbed her hand. It worked. The ship opened fire, protecting the cave. Soldiers rushed out. Human soldiers. One approached Jacob. We got your signal. Jacob smiled. You're just in time. Later, inside the ship, Reza slept peacefully for the first time in days. Tali sat beside him, wrapped in a clean blanket. Her face was tired but calm. Jacob walked over, now bandaged and resting. The human captain approached them. We're heading back to Earth Colony. You'll be safe there. Tali looked at Jacob. He smiled. A new start. She touched his hand gently. No more run? He shook his head. No more run. Weeks passed. Tali was given a small home near the colony edge. Other refugees lived nearby, different races, different stories, but all rebuilding. Jacob visited every day, helped fix the roof, brought food, told stories to Reza. One day Tali waited at the door with Reza in her arms. Her eyes were shining. You come every day, she said. Jacob laughed. I like the soup. She stepped closer. No. You stay. Jacob's heart stopped. What? Tali placed Reza into his arms. He sleep better with you, she whispered. Jacob held the baby gently. I trust you, she said. She reached out and took his hand. You are not just human, you are family. That night, under the stars of a safer world, a fire burned outside their small home. Not for warmth, but for hope. A widow with nothing, a man who gave everything, and a baby who now had both. A new family, a new fire, burning bright, forever.